more corporates need to get involved in urban development, not just as vendors, but as creators of frameworks.
Hello and welcome to the season 2 of Understanding the Future. I am your host Punit Gandhi, and Climate Center for Cities is excited to bring to you a podcast about the future of work in the field of climate change, urban development, sustainability, and innovation. We will talk to experts working on ground as well as in the top management of government and non-governmental organizations to better understand how their field looks like in future. This will help us in preparing to enable climate actions as well as gauge the type of skill sets and jobs that would be required in future to solve complex challenges. If you are listening to it for the first time, do tune into season 1.
Hello and welcome to the season 2 of Understanding the Future. I am your host Punit Gandhi, and today we have with us Shabnam Siddiqui. She is the Executive Director at UN Global Compact Network India. She will help us understand ESG for corporates on today's episode. Welcome to the show, Shabnam.
Thank you so much, Punit.
As the topic suggests, it's ESG for corporates. Let's start with what is ESG? What are we talking about when we are talking about ESG?
So essentially, I think as we move ahead and as we come out of the pandemic, especially, this entire concept of being aware of, being cognizant of the environment, being cognizant of society, both in terms of the impact that corporates have on them, as well as the additional effort that can go into it, is where this entire concept of environment and social governance amongst, especially corporates, had come about. But before that, I think just to give a quick background about our work. So I represent the United Nations Global Compact. I am the Executive Director of the India Network. And what we do at the Global Compact is the fact that we hold corporates accountable to the UN conventions, to the UN guidelines that each country has signed up for. And within the UN system, the ecosystem, we are the only agency that directly works with or gets involved with corporates. Okay. And as we are working with corporates, we realize that the larger mandate of the UN of peace building, of good governance, of the goals that the UN has spearheaded, whether it was the Millennium Development Goals earlier or the Sustainable Development Goals now, how can companies, businesses adhere to it is what we look at as an organization. And that's where this entire focus on the environment and social aspect comes through both globally and nationally.
Okay, and I'm glad that UN is doing this kind of work as well, because I think we can't just focus on one part of the equation and leave out the rest. When corporates are again important for a lot of things, and if they are made accountable for it, I think it was for the better cause. So let's break down ESG. So we have environmental, social, and governance point of view. Now, when we are looking at all 3 points of view, they vary drastically for every kind of organization in corporates as well. So how is that taken into account?
So essentially, when we talk about a whole set of governance values or the ESG framework, as we speak about it, there are some values. Global Compact has been formed on the basis of principles. Okay. Essentially, it's been a learning from within the corporate world. So we have had these World Economic Forums for a couple of decades. And at one of the World Economic Forums in Davos in the year 2000, the idea came about that because business is part of society's problem, they need to be a part of the solution. Yeah. And with that in mind, businesses collectively agreed to, under the leadership of Mr. Kofi Annan, who was the then Secretary General, that they will adhere to a set of principles on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. Okay. So how do those principles get translated in different geographies? And how do those principles get translated into different verticals within an industry? So if you're saying a manufacturing sector, what does it mean to them? What are their challenges more, and what do they want more handholding on? If it is an agricultural set of companies, it's different. If it's the energy sector, it is different. So depending on the sector-wise, division of the companies, the frameworks are different. And the idea that has evolved is that earlier, especially in countries like India, when at least there was a lot of bent of mind towards philanthropy, the idea was that a business should avoid doing harm. But from the doing no harm to doing more good is what the journey of ESG has been, in my understanding.
Okay. So that's a very interesting way to look at it, that doing no harm to doing more good, because I think again that brings back people to the center of this whole thing. While when you're looking at corporates, that's quite the opposite. Uh, I'm not sure, like it's always opposite or not. Somehow they are the center of it as well, but in a very different fashion of it. Uh, but so coming to the Indian perspective of it, we have had CSR generally. So how is ESG and CSR aligned or different?
So essentially, I think they're quite different in general, because the corporate social responsibility, as we understood it in India, which was voluntary earlier, and now, like with recent amendments, is getting the rules are getting more stringent. It was more like you do something and then you have a percent of your profits, and you pull back that into society to doing better projects. When you come to ESG, it is about mainstreaming those values in your business operations. And that essentially is where the entire divide is. Earlier, you could be doing a lot of, if you only look at the extractive industries, you could do a lot of damage to the environment. You could do a lot of damage to the labor force. You could flout, especially in the manufacturing sector, labor laws and all that. As far as you are giving 2% of your profits and like into investing into projects, you could have you could sleep well, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But the understanding that a lot of it now needs to be mainstreamed, so that you do not make those necessary choices. If there's a choice of how you can be a better, more ethical business or corporate house, is where the transition is. I think one has led to the other. So like the understanding of the closer working association of corporates through CSR with communities made them see a lot of things firsthand, and that is why for them to accept ESG values and to report on it became just more easier for the corporates that were willing to do it. For the corporates that needed a push, the mandatory compliances helped in pushing it further. So they are in some senses interrelated, but not completely synergized with each other.
Okay. And ESG currently is not mandatory. Only some companies take it up. As much as I have read and did my research, some of the top 100, 200 companies try to focus on it also from the stock market point of view. And this is how it is being promoted. So, what are the current challenges we have seen in the Indian industrial scenario on uptake of these kind of things?
So uptake has been a bit slow to begin with, and perhaps all kinds of progress on good governance values might suffer a further setback because of the pandemic. Because as soon as whenever we open the lockdown and whenever life does come back to normal, which is still far ahead, there will be a lot of focus on maximizing benefits. Because there has been a lot of losses that have happened, would have happened over the last couple of years for some corporates. So progress has been slow. But what I've seen in general in India has been that most of our compliances initially are very flexible, very pliable. And then when people get used to it, get a hang of it, then it becomes mandatory. So I think ESG would definitely go down a similar route going forward. Because now, there are some organizations always that love to be the early starters. So they are willing to experiment and try out new things. But as soon as there are positive results from those aspects, I don't I foresee not too long in the future that ESG would become mandatory, and perhaps we'd move to something bigger after that. So slowly and steadily, it will definitely become mandatory.
I do hope so that happens, because as much as I look at it from my perspective, the major challenge what I foresee over here is on the lines of governance part. You can still do a lot of environmental things because they are off-shelf products that you have to do it. Social is not the easiest one, but somewhere more close to people, so it's easy to do. Governance is a major shift in how policies are framed inside the company, how things are done. And that is where, so are there any things being done to handhold organizations on those lines?
Kind of. So, for example, and Global Compact is just one of the organizations
Yeah.
that is doing it. But what we try to do as an organization is bring collective wisdom to the table. So many a times, being non-business person, people ourselves, coming from the social sector,
Yeah.
perhaps our understanding of corporate culture, corporate requirement, corporate challenges would be different. But when you get 5 different corporates, both public and private sector, in a room across the table, for
Yeah.
them the peer learning aspect enhances. And to provide that kind of platform for non moral or non-judgmental discussion has definitely enhanced work, because people learn from each other. And most of the time, as children, as we grow up, we have been told time and again that people might not learn, or might not learn from what you tell them, but they learn from what you do. So getting those kind of flagship companies and flagship projects and flagship initiatives, the lighthouse ones, in the forefront is what we are trying to do. And then once you have something that is unique, then other companies coming together to see, can they achieve that? Can they go beyond? Can they do something different? So that becomes easier. It's a lot of negotiations. It's a lot of learning that happens. And 10 years in the Global Compact, and to me, it still every day still seems to be as if I'm learning something new. So it's a great field to be in, governance, especially corporate governance, the entire ESG framework, because it's an evolving framework. What we are also trying to focus now, 2021 onwards, is to look at skilling.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our traditional skill sets might or might not be appropriate for the kind of evolution that's happening in the governance structure. So
Yeah.
even to identify what kind of skilling is important, and different verticals, like a simple thing as CSR, if you look at companies, wherever CSR is being managed by professionals having understanding, having background in those kind of roles, the impact is much stronger than when it is an added responsibility given to somebody within the system, as in terms of just a different role to do within the same company.
Yeah.
And it's not saying one versus the other, but just that if you have the right kind of skill sets and the education to back it up, the right
Yeah.
kind of skill sets, then you just do a better job at it. Because learning takes time. By the time you learn, then you're ready for another role within an
True.
organization. So
True.
skilling becomes important.
I do agree, and I think that is where a lot of buzz is also coming around on the lines of just transition things, where how do we, because you're let's just take automotive sector. That is one of the biggest sectors, especially in India as well. You have traditionally employed so many people in making gears and making IC engines and everything. Now, with electric cars coming in, how will they go ahead? What do we do with them? And your mechanical workshops are dying down then. So
Yeah.
what happens with them? So that
So,
becomes, I think,
but
a
I
very
think,
integral part to it.
Puneet, because I think that is what the I personally think that's only ringside view of the entire domain. Because companies, when they strategize, companies when they come up with, when they invest so much R&D into coming up with new designs or new products,
Yeah.
do a lot of back and forth. I was very amazed a couple of years ago when I sat with one of the companies, and just to realize that when they had planned to launch a product, they
Yeah.
had done a 20-year mapping and planning of it, of how it will evolve and how it will grow. And that
Wow.
kind of planning is not something that the social sector is used to.
Yeah.
And especially our generation at the moment, which is so used to short time news handles and short time news alerts, and the word count of Twitter, and repeated knowledge, that
Yeah.
we don't realize that many of these businesses, when they do involve and we see the market failing, but they
Yeah.
have done the maths and they have invested, keeping in mind a very long future in mind. So I think it's very, and if you see a ringside view, it will look catastrophic, but slowly and steadily you see how markets grow, and understanding comes. Some calculations can always go wrong, but most of the time, the planning is really good.
Okay, that sounds fascinating, because a 20-year plan would be great on our level
Just
as
for
well.
one product, just for one product.
Exactly. So if we are also designing policies or something on those lines, which we can envision up to next 20, 30 years, something like master plans that are created for cities. It would make it much more fascinating and would account for many more things than what we would usually do.
True. In fact, I personally think that is the only way to do things. Like anything that you do, if you do not have a 20 to 25 year worldview, whether irrespective of the fact whether you individually, personally are engaged in that kind of work or not, it defeats the purpose. And that is what the sustainable development goals are all about. Like even if you see the sustainable development goals, if it is a framework for 15 years, the first 5 years just go about learning how it is important to you, where it can be implemented, to know that the goals are very specific. Every goal has a target. The targets have to be mapped against indicators. It's not some randomized report that comes up. 5 years go into learning. By the time you implement, it's also time to wrap up. So 15 years seems so small. 25 years is the minimum that we should let an idea grow before you can really map its impact. So I think that is a good skill set, irrespective of the vertical or sector that you're engaged in, as well as geographies.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree with that point. So coming back to the that side of the story where we are talking about social and governance. Now, these are very subjective points, while and not directly, that okay, we can give something this much credit or this much of marks or whatever we are looking at it. How do we quantify those things in a corporate sector? Because again, it would be different for an automotive industry, mining industry, or somewhere like a BPO. So they're all part of corporate, but they're very different.
No, so I think, but for that, there are different kinds of reporting that exists. So right from so Global Compact has one sort of reporting. Our sister agency, GRI, has another kind of reporting. In India, we have also, for the last couple of years, experimented with integrated reporting. So the reporting, when you see in an overall scenario, in fact, reporting is also a major pain for some of the corporates, because they have to respond to so many more domains and they have to give so many more figures. So reporting is there and corporates are reporting on that. I think in India, what we need to do, much like European countries, is to see whether how we can move towards an integrated report, in which all other subsidiary reportings can get integrated, because that will help companies to comply more. If we have too many check boxes, then people will just tick. But if you have few check boxes, few qualitative questions, then company can also write about their challenges and how they can evolve in those kind of things. So the reporting structure is there. People who are involved in the reporting roles within the organizations, they are well aware of it. But what kind of reporting impact for the rest of the business and the rest of society, I think that is a gap that is there in current times that needs to be responded to as much as possible. How do non-corporates understand the reporting of corporates beyond figures?
Okay. Fair enough. And that you mentioned that there are, India should try to go towards integrated reporting. So what all reports are we currently giving, and how can they be merged with ESG as of now?
So ESG is just one aspect. It's the environment and social governance aspect, but there's a lot of new indices that are coming up in different countries. Like recently, for example, in November 2021, there will be this biodiversity summit in China, which will talk about a nature index, which is for nature. So you map a country's sustainability, or you map a country's growth according to the natural ecosystems that they have managed to conserve. Now, those kind of things has not been there in formal reporting formats. And I personally believe that, for example, if a shift away is done from GDP, which will be slow and which will take time, but if and when that happens, countries like India, countries in Southeast Asia, countries in Latin America, Africa, would emerge higher up in numbers, because they have managed comparatively to be to hold on to their ecosystems and still do progress.
Yeah.
When it comes to just rough numbers and industry, then these countries lag behind. So what gets valued, if those value denominators change,
Yeah.
then like countries ranking also overall will change. So it's again the same thing about people, planet, prosperity and partnership that we all talk about, and
Yeah.
how do we break it down and how do we understand them more.
Yeah. And this was again, I guess, spoken up in UN as well on the lines of beyond GDP and going beyond this whole aspect of gross domestic product. We are based on that as of now. I really hope we go away from it. We have now happiness index coming up. You just mentioned about nature index. Uh, can
Mhm.
can we have a quantifiable way to merge all these indexes up as well?
So I think we are kind of moving towards that. And as of now, from what limited understanding I have, integrated reporting that SEBI had, I think, 2 years ago, like rolled out and suggested that the top 500 companies get working on that. I think from what when I saw it last, there were only 9 companies doing it. Maybe there are more now. So
Yeah.
that kind of gets into the verticals of how not only how you report every vertical, but how each vertical is interconnected to each other. Just like
Yeah.
we say in the sustainable development goals, that every goal is there's impact and there's value, but every goal is interconnected with the other goal. And what interconnectedness, we call this the wheel of the SDG wheel, that shows the interconnectivity. Those things become important. So the frameworks, I think, to my understanding, integrated reporting that had come about, I think I attended the meeting 2 years ago, was really good to start off with.
Okay, that would be quite fascinating to look out for as well. And I hope that we can maybe take out more of impacts out of that as well, especially because the new age industries that will come up, especially on the electronic side, I feel, because everywhere now there is IoT device or somewhere on the line some form of electronics industry.
True, true, true.
While they are small, the amount of materials they will consume is going to be huge. Uh,
The
and the
carbon footprint
processing
will be
and
huge.
refurbishing
The
of it.
waste will be huge. Yes. Like for example, a simple thing as the digital world that we have gone towards in the last 1 year,
Yeah.
we underestimate or we fail to estimate the kind of we are seeing of how we are saving on fuel and the travel cost and the carbon footprint. By the same time, this entire digital
Yeah.
pollution, or the digital detoxification, and what kind of reporting is required, so that will be a completely new set of values and set of framework that is evolving at the moment. In fact, I'm personally engaged in developing, for example, compliance systems for innovators, because countries like
Okay.
India, we have a lot of startups, we have a lot of companies evolving, and when you are evolving at that early stage,
Yeah.
compliance is never the first thing to pop up in your mind.
Yeah.
It's about how to access funds, how to scale and those kinds of things. But how do you put compliance structures in place at the beginning so that there's no fallback afterwards? And this
Yeah.
has come from a learning global compact. We did a study in 2000, a couple of years ago. So in 2013 to 15, we had done this study in which what we had done was we had looked at indicted cases of corporate fraud,
Yeah.
and that had been over 15 years. And we
Yeah.
realized that most of the fraud happened when it was initially a very small mistake, but because nobody took accountability, the cover up was so immense that it ended
Yeah.
up being in a big fraud and big money got exchanged and those kind of things.
Yeah.
But so those kind of hand holding is instead of letting something go wrong and then complaining about it, we are trying to see where we can fit in, where we can get the right kind of systems in place so that things
Yeah.
evolve. And I think that is connected with the urban framework that NIUA is working with, especially the climate smart cities. Because if you look at urban environment, if you look at urban infrastructure, how does development and nature converge? Can it feed on each other? How do we so those are kind of practical ground level realities that
Yeah.
we need to explore. No problem is without a solution.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see our mind focus, whether we will focus on the problem of what cannot be done, or where we look at solutions of what are the possibilities, what are the alternatives, and we go ahead with that. So I think that kind of mindset in terms of the evolving challenges of environment and corporate governance is something that we'll need to watch out for, and do the best to be ready when they come up, so that we can come up with solutions faster.
I absolutely, that would be interesting to see as well. And if it made it exciting that compliance systems for innovators is something that we would be super interested as well, because we do believe that urban ecosystem requires that kind of startups. How do
Sure.
we make sure that they can come in together? If you can maybe give a brief about that or something, that would be quite fascinating for us.
So we're still working on it. In fact, what we have done is we'll be working on it the next 2 months, because currently the first thing will be to come up to see what compliance mechanisms are there already on the ground. My presumption is there are less, but sometimes you presume less, and then when you actually go do the research, you realize there's so many much more. And then to see what works for different verticals again.
Yeah.
Wherever there is, whenever any innovation will have more people engagement, the set of compliances that will be required will be different.
Yeah.
Wherever technology is at the forefront, the kind of compliances that will be required will be different. If it's a health startup, if it's an educational startup, the compliances will be different. So just to understand the requirements of the innovation and startup space, and to come up with a architecture of compliances is what we are looking at. So we hope to get it ready. It's still underway, so I cannot talk much about it
Yeah.
at the moment. But we hope to have something ready by August to share it with a wider audience.
That would be great. I will bring you back after that to talk about the same.
Sure.
Uh,
Perfect.
Coming to one of the last questions that we generally have for all our panelists is, what kind of skill sets do you see important in lines of ESG when we are talking about ESG? What are the core skill sets that would be required here?
So it's a tough question, because I think more than skill sets, I personally believe that ESG requires a commitment and a temperament.
Okay.
And that kind of commitment and temperament, in the sense of the set of values, the set of principles, for example, that we incorporate at the Global Compact, are crucial, because I've seen many a times somebody from, like, say, a management field, uh, with the right kind of direction, with the right kind of knowledge, could emerge as a better proponent of like you know ESG, compared to perhaps the value loaded social study system sometimes
Yeah.
that come up with the requirement. So it's a very it's not a very clear cut shift of skill sets that I foresee myself, but one mindset, and then a complete. So I'm a big believer of monitoring and evaluation. So if we keep evaluating where we are falling short, what next to be done, how do we do it? I think those kind of things will help in the ESG governance framework. Otherwise, it's an open field for management, for legal analysts, or from for the corporate culture, and everybody will come to it with a different angle, so to say. And the best example for this is if you look at gender studies, or especially women's integration into the workforce, the way that a corporate board member will think about the issue will be different vis-a-vis a legal personnel that will talk about rights, vis-a-vis a social sector expert that will talk about equity and all that.
Yeah.
But it's an open field, and it will require a lot of flexibility, a lot of desire to learn and perform, and at the end of the day, always willing and openness to change,
Yeah.
because any set skill set will get outdated very fast in today's time, both in the corporate culture and the social setup. Strategies and businesses are evolving at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
So unless you're completely on top of it and completely ready to evolve, it becomes a challenge. So all
Yeah.
skill skill sets, but right temperament.
I do agree, especially having worked in this sector for now more than 2 years. I do agree that it's required.
Yes.
Thank you so much. If I have missed out on any point that you would like to cover, you can do so.
No, generally, I think like with the corporate culture, one thing that we have been, as the Global Compact, also trying to share has been the very fact that more corporates need to get involved in urban development, not just as vendors but as creators of frameworks. Because what has happened over the years, because we work with the within the smart cities framework in a couple of cities also, and
Yeah.
while businesses can build your infrastructure or get your technology or can do the the actual work in terms of getting things done. But I believe that if you involve them in the ideation stage, because business has a mindset of maximization, that will really help. And as an example, I wanted to give that I was speaking to one of my corporate houses, and they spoke about, and it was about building a flyover or something.
Yeah.
And then government believes that everything, so if it's a PPP partnership, things work, we give them this, they give us this, and that's everybody lives happily
Yeah.
and ever after, which does not happen.
Yeah.
Because the government has access to a lot of resources which it does not know how to monetize, and the business has a lot of ideas on how to monetize but does not have the authority. So I think as we develop frameworks and as our cities expand, as our urban spaces and peri-urban areas expand, getting the right kind of business counterparts to sit on the table to say what will work, what will not work. If they come in as for bidding only, they will bid and put their right foot in, and they'll try to convince you of everything else. But if you bring them in as advisors also, that really helps. So that kind of collective action between urban bodies and businesses is extremely crucial. Not to see each other as the Tom and Jerry kind of a thing,
Yeah.
but to see how more symbiotically you can work together, because that will give more results to the city in general. So I think
Absolutely.
that is an area that we need to focus on going forward. So any committees that gets formed for road widening or for building infrastructure, if you can get somebody involved to advise of what works, what doesn't. In today's times, there's a lot of recycled products that are available that businesses use all the time.
Yeah.
That will respond to the climate action framework also,
Yeah.
which as researchers or which as urban practitioners you might not have access to, but the businesses have access to those kind of information. So I think picking their minds more when you develop strategies and policies, and not only when it gets implemented, is very important. So I think I just wanted to add that on the table.
Thank you. Absolutely. That was very much required. And I do believe that collaborations on those lines will only lead to better ecosystem in general.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Shabnam. This was absolutely fascinating, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you also.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Understanding the Future podcast. To know more about Climate Center for Cities, check out our website www.niua.org/c-q. The show is conceptualized, produced and edited by Punit Gandhi, Senior Associate at CQ. You can now subscribe to our podcast on your favorite channel, which can be accessed through the credits. Also, don't forget to follow us on our social media for more updates. Do share your reviews with us and help us spread the podcast to your friends and colleagues. Do write to us if you would be interested in learning about any specific topics. Thank you and stay tuned for our next episode.